My name is John Davis and I'm delighted to present to you today on the very topic that steered me in the direction of my current role as CEO of the Australian Constructors Association, improving industry productivity. There are few times in life when the moons align for generational change, and I believe COVID provides that opportunity for the construction industry. In fact, there's never been a better time to address the issues holding our industry back and in the process to fundamentally change how we procure and deliver projects. All levels of government are relying on the construction industry to lead the economy forward on the basis that every dollar spent on infrastructure has a $3 kick-on to the wider economy. But there are roadblocks. We need to break these roadblocks to truly realise the opportunity, not just for workers in the construction industry, but for all Australians. So let me start by putting forward the case for change. Despite being the nation's third largest industry, the construction industry consistently has one of the highest rates of insolvencies in Australia. Productivity growth over the last 30 years has trailed other significant industries by 25%. Only 12% of our workforce are women. And most shockingly, our workers are 6 times more likely to die from suicide than a workplace incident. Whilst there is much that industry can and should do, many of these problems can be attributed to a client focus on lowest cost over best value and the use of adversarial procurement models with inappropriate risk allocations. These procurement models can also be partially blamed for the slow adoption of productivity-enhancing tools and processes like lean construction and BIM. Both of these tools have been around for 30 years, but are yet to be widely adopted because at their heart, they rely on open and transparent sharing of information. And the most commonly used contracts over the last 10 years drive the opposite behaviours. They promote withholding of information as it can be used to prepare or defend claims. If we can address these problems that are holding our industry back, the opportunity is huge. If we could just halve the gap in productivity growth between the construction industry and other industries over the past 30 years, let's not get too ambitious here, just half the gap. We could construct an extra $15 billion of infrastructure every year for the same level of expenditure and employ an extra 15,000 people. That's the equivalent of constructing 3 extra Western Sydney airports every year. This saving will be vital in a post-COVID world with high levels of government debt, but no less of a requirement for infrastructure. Importantly, it will also help address the looming capacity shortfall identified by Infrastructure Australia in their inaugural Market Capacity Report published in October. But how do we realise this opportunity and pave the way forward? The Australian Constructors Association has identified 3 key pillars to a sustainable construction industry: improved industry culture, sufficient capability, capacity and skills, and equitable and aligned commercial frameworks. The challenge with strengthening these pillars is that they are all interlinked. Improvement in one requires improvement in all. If we consider the commercial frameworks used over the last 10 years, they've helped drive a very adversarial culture in our industry. And that culture is now impacting on our ability to attract and retain the people we need to deliver the pipeline of work ahead of us. But let's look at the 3 pillars of a sustainable construction industry in more detail and talk about equitable and aligned commercial frameworks. We currently operate in an environment where a focus on lowest cost at the tender box is stifling investment in new technology and holding the industry back from realising the $15 billion opportunity. What contractor is going to propose a solution that reduces life cycle costs if it increases the initial capital cost on which they will be assessed? What designer will propose a solution that reduces the carbon content of a structure if it involves more design work? Instead of focusing on the lowest cost bid, clients need to shift their mindset and start buying infrastructure based on best value. Amongst other things, a focus on value for money could result in additional local content, reduced environmental impact, increased use of social and indigenous enterprise, increased innovation and improved productivity, as well as a reduced life cycle cost and increased industry diversity. So how do we achieve this? The Grattan Institute, in its report, Mega Bang for Megabucks, suggested governments need to drive a harder bargain to deliver greater value to taxpayers. This notion perpetuates the idea that construction is a zero-sum game, and it is precisely this approach that has led us to the situation where project cost and time blowouts regularly make the headlines, and construction productivity has hardly grown in 30 years. Driving a harder bargain is not the way forward. The way forward to a more sustainable and more productive industry is through increased collaboration. The construction industry is complex. Projects are essentially built by many interconnected teams of people fed by long supply chains that are ultimately managed by contractors. Ensuring positive outcomes in a complex environment can't be achieved through a contract alone, because a contract presumes you can know everything in advance, can plan for it, and allocate all the risks effectively. The use of more collaborative contracting arrangements, however, can align the interests of the parties to resolving problems as they occur, to achieve mutually beneficial outcomes, rather than for the benefit of one party over another. They also facilitate greater engagement and earlier involvement of the supply chain to identify potential issues and drive innovation. Recognising the important role of all stakeholders, the Australian Constructors Association has been working with the New South Wales and Victorian governments through the Construction Industry Leadership Forum in promoting collaborative procurement models and developing a framework to better define value for money than just lowest price. Through the Construction Industry Leadership Forum, we've seen a greater uptake of successful collaborative frameworks and programs of work, such as the level crossing removal program in Victoria, the Sydney Metro Greater West Early Identification of Risk Pilot, and the incorporation of an incentivised target cost model at the heart of the Melbourne North East Link public-private partnership, something I've never seen before in my 30-year career. The state-based reform is good news for industry, but to have a real impact, construction needs even more collaboration and even less conflict. While there isn't a single solution, a starting point is for the federal government to lead reforms to improve the way governments procure and deliver projects. Consistent with the recommendations in the Australian Infrastructure Plan, the creation of a federally led government and industry collaborative leadership group is needed, and it's needed now. As a direct procurer of major projects and as a significant source of funding for jurisdictionally led projects, the federal government is best placed to lead the charge. A collaborative approach between federal and state governments, as well as industry, would result in a more coherent implementation of reforms through sharing and adoption of best practice. Just to be clear, I'm not suggesting that the federal government be tasked with solving the problems alone. The problems are shared, and a joint response is required. I'm suggesting they coordinate and incentivise reform, because let's face it, if we could solve the problems and issues ourselves, we would. As the momentum for more equitable and aligned commercial frameworks gains pace, the culture of our industry is also coming into focus. This brings me on to the second pillar of a sustainable construction industry, a positive industry culture. The work of the Construction Industry Culture Task Force, another Australian Constructors Association partnership with the governments of New South Wales and Victoria, is set to perform an important role in shaping the industry's culture. The Cost of Doing Nothing report published by BIS Oxford Economics estimated that a poor culture in the construction industry is costing the economy over $8 billion every year. To break this down further, the estimated cost of lost well-being from work-related fatalities, injuries and illnesses in 2018 was $6.1 billion. The productivity cost of employees consistently working overtime was $708 million. The cost of mental ill health was $643 million, and the cost of higher incidence of male construction worker suicides compared to other industries was $533 million. Guided by academic research, the Construction Industry Culture Task Force has developed an industry culture standard. With many construction sites operating 6 to 7 days per week to meet delivery timeframes, the Construction Industry Culture Standard recognises the challenges of long work hours and the need for people working in our industry to have adequate time to rest and pursue life activities outside of work. To help improve the industry's culture, the standard details with measures that, if adopted, will improve time for life, well-being, diversity and inclusion. Once finalised, governments will be called upon to incorporate compliance with the culture standard into their standard procurement requirements. With equitable and aligned commercial frameworks and a positive industry culture, we are already on the road to strengthening the third and final pillar, capability and capacity. Infrastructure Australia's Infrastructure Market Capacity Report suggests major public infrastructure activity will approximately double over the next 3 years, peaking at $52 billion in 2023. Whilst this record investment creates new opportunities, it presents a major risk for the capacity of the market to meet this growth in investment. Already there are shortages of various occupations within the sector, and now is the right time to incentivise training, upskill and attract the other half of the working population who currently choose not to work in the industry, women. With international borders closed and high demand for workers when they do reopen, industry reforms must focus on driving productivity and innovation as recommended by Infrastructure Australia, so we can do more with less. Again, the work of the Construction Industry Leadership Forum is highly relevant, with a focus on leadership, skills and industry attraction. At the start of my presentation, I said today's topic is the reason I joined the Australian Constructors Association. After 30 years undertaking commercial roles for major contractors, I tell you, there has got to be a better way. Other industries have powered ahead of construction and left us behind. So much so that construction has the lowest proportion of female workers of any industry and is the second worst performing industry when it comes to adoption of digital technologies. Infrastructure Australia rightly declares the challenge for the industry as being the need to drive a step change in infrastructure productivity and innovation, which the independent advisor says is a shared responsibility between government and industry. Reform of the magnitude required will only happen through greater collaboration across all levels of government and in consultation with industry. And to top it off, it will take leadership from the federal government. So, to summarise, the construction industry has been presented with an enormous opportunity. We've been called upon to lead the nation's economic recovery, but we were faced with challenges that could seriously impact on our ability to do this. We all know what these problems are and what needs to be done to address them. COVID has shown we can all collaborate when faced with a common problem, and we need to continue to do this. You all have a part to play in achieving change, and I call on all of you to be informed, to be part of the conversation, and to challenge the status quo. If successful, we'll create an industry that is more productive and has less impact on the environment. We'll create an industry that encourages innovation and strives to continuously improve, that it is an inclusive industry of choice for the next generation of workers. And what's not to like about that? Thank you.